Hey, it's Hutch from Hutch High Perf. A quick word before we get started. Jason commented on the camshaft video. He's an old guy, and he said, hey, I think you're supposed to use the eccentric on the cam sprocket. I think, assumably, it acts like a large washer for the bolt. Before I put the sprocket on, since the camshaft bolt is a little bit long, I ran it all the way down with just the camshaft, and it bottomed out inside the camshaft. So I knew with the sprocket on, I was going to have enough room to be able to torque it properly without bottoming out in the cam. So that's what I did. But after he said that, I was just like, let me check. So I go to the Google machine, and I can't find anything that says that you have to use the eccentric on an Oldsmobile application. I can't find anything that says you can't. I can't find anything at all. There's nothing really written about it. So it cost me nothing but like 15 minutes to clean up the eccentric, take the bolt out, put the eccentric on, blue Loctite, put it back down, retorque it. So I'm not taking any chances, and thank you, Jason, for that comment, because it made me scratch my head and look, and I would rather have that on. It's not going to affect anything. It's supposed to be there anyway if you're using a fuel pump, mechanical style. So it's not costing me anything but a little bit of time. But it's given me a lot of peace of mind knowing that it's not going to be an issue. No one wants to tear the front part of their engine apart, ever, if you don't have to. So anyway, I decided to put it on. Thank you, Jason. All right, let's get to the video. Piston rings. Let's take these out, take a look. I like this because everything's individually packed. First groove, second groove, and then third groove. Can't get it mixed up. But even if for some reason you got these switched around, because they're chromoly, this is second groove. Second groove, regular ductile iron type ring. And then your top groove. Top groove has the chromoly edge. So, can't really mix them up. So the rings have a chamfered edge on the inside. You'll notice when you get them. There's also, if you can see it, a dot. This dot faces up in the cylinder. So can't get that wrong either, as long as you're paying attention. This is our number one cylinder, and here is the ring. So we're going to get this ring positioned in here, and we're going to use a tool. So we bottom this thing out, not bottom out, but we put it down in the cylinder, appropriate depth. Check it at a couple of different spots. It's only 3 points of contact. So with the ring down in the bore, we check it with the feeler gauge. That is a very nice snug 23 thousandths. So the manual calls for anywhere from 20 to 40. So I'm on the tight end of that, which is good. If you don't have the spec for some reason, you can always use the calculation, which is you measure the size of your bore and then you multiply that by 4 thousandths, which is 0.004. That number will give you the closest ring gap you can have. It doesn't give you a range, like in the manual when you look, it says 20 to 40. So if you're somewhere in there, you're okay. But it will give you the minimum amount of clearance you can have. If you do that calculation based on this bore, it is 17 thousandths, so I'm at 23, so that's pretty good. And I put all the rings in, all the different cylinders, and they all come up the same. They're 23. These are not file fit. These are just standard rings. Take them out of the package, put them on your piston, put them in the car. I check every single one. So let's talk about stacked tolerances. So stacked tolerance is when you have multiple things that are made in different times, and then they have to fit together. So the machine shop had a tolerance for boring this out 60 over. And then there's a tolerance after that for the final hone to get you to your actual size. So that could be off by what, 1,000th maybe between one cylinder and the next, just by the way the cutting tool works, you know. So you have the same thing with rings. All these rings are made to a specific size, and so far they all check out 23 thousandths. But I did have cylinder number 8 and then cylinder number 5 and cylinder number 8. 5 was really snug on 23 thousandths, and 8 seemed like it was a little easier on 23 thousandths. So what I did was I took those two rings and I swapped them between the cylinders, and now they're both about the same type of snugness. So I like to do that on everything. It's probably not necessary. You're talking thousandths of an inch, and I'm well within the spec range, 20 to 40 by what the book says. But I still like to do this. And sometimes when you overbuild or overcheck things when you're putting it together, you end up not having to rebuild or recheck things later on. So that's how I do it. That's how I've always done it. I'm going to do every ring like that, and then every cylinder goes in its own little baggie. So when I'm done, the top ring, the second ring, and the oil rings will all be specific to the cylinder they go to, and that way I know everything is up to par as far as I'm concerned. Let's go ahead and at least get the first two pistons in so we can check that cam. All right, so let's do piston number 1. Get our rings out here. All right, this bad boy on first. It's our oil control ring. And I'm going to put the split on that right in the middle of the skirt. And then we've got our two oil rings. Just fit these in. All right. So I put the control gap, like I said, center of the skirt, and then I do the gap on the bottom and upper rings on opposite sides of the pin. So that's that side. Let's do this one. All right, that feels good. And then we'll go to our second ring. This is like the oil scraper, the oil control ring, oil scraper ring, I guess is what you would call it. So just gonna make sure that my dot is pointed up. You can buy these pliers that like spread out. You basically, you put it in where the gap is, and when you close the pliers, it spreads it out. But these rings are a bit on the fragile side, and sometimes you can snap them doing that. So I find if you just take your time, put it in slow, you can fit this bad boy in without too much problem. There we go. Put that one on the skirt over there. And then we'll do our chromoly top ring. Make sure our dot is on top. Okay, now I still do this. I put the top two rings and I stagger them on either side of the skirt. I'm going to be honest with you, and here's the truth of the matter. These top two rings, the whole time the engine's running and when it's going up and down, these things are spinning. So yeah, you can put them on either side and that's how it's going to act when you first start it. But these things are going to move around. So honestly, it almost doesn't matter where you put them. But anyway, so those are all the rings put on. Now we're going to stab it into number one hole. I always lube up with a little bit of the Marvel Mystery Oil on the skirts, same as I do for the cylinder walls when I clean them. But you do what you do. It's fine by me. All right. Got my compressor on. It's a ring compressor. Then you see that there is an arrow that needs to be pointing forward. Oh, these came with some Plasti-Gauge that I bought. I usually just use like a heater hose, whatever size fits the bolts. A lot of the newer rods, it's actually a bolt, not a pressed in stud and nut like this. But yeah, so that's what I do for that. So I like to have the deck completely flat. That way when I put the piston in, the rod doesn't drag on either end of the cylinder wall just by gravity. All right, it's about straight. There she's in. So if I didn't mention it, the bearing is in the rod and it is pre-lubed. So what I like to do is I put the crank journal all the way at the bottom of the throw based on where it is in the cylinder. That way the rod comes down and it doesn't have any awkward contact with the journal until I get it in. And then once it's hammered in, I can push it with my hand down and I can better guide it onto the journal without any issues. And there it is. So now we just put the cap on. Like the top on the rod, we lube up our rod journal, our rod cap. So we lube up the rod cap with the same assembly lube. And then we just pop it on. The rod bolts are ARP, just like the main studs, and they assemble the same way using the molly. So I'm not torquing these now, getting them snug down so they'll stay where they're at. We can rotate them around without any issues. And then we'll do the torque on them a little later. Now I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing for number 2. So pistons 1 and 2 are in, and now we're going to check our camshaft, which means we have to degree it in. And the first thing we're going to do is find top dead center. So I'm using the Piston Stop method. So we'll run our bolts down. All right, with that snugged in place, I'll move the camera around and we'll take a look at the degree wheel. So we've got our degree wheel on. I've got my pointer set up and got the piston stop on. So the piston stop does exactly that. It stops the piston before it gets to top dead center. And the reason you want to do that is because if you try to eyeball top dead center on your own, it's never, you could be off by several degrees, up to 4, which is going to make a big difference when you're trying to degree the camshaft. So imagine it this way. So this is the piston and this is the rod, and at the bottom it's connected to the crankshaft. So as it comes up in the cylinder and it gets to top dead center, the crankshaft has to throw over to the other side to pull it back down. Well, that delay in the middle, you can be off while it's transitioning from one side to the other to pull it back down. So what you do is you run it up to the stop, and I find the easiest way, you run it up to the stop and then set the degree wheel to 0. Run it the opposite direction all the way until it hits the stop again, and then find out what that number is. Whatever that number is, you divide that in half. Move the degree wheel to that point, and then you can double check it by rotating through, and it should stop on that number both times. So let's give it a try and see if I know what I'm talking about. So let's move in right on the pointer. There we go. So we're going to move clockwise, and we've hit the stop. Oh, lucky, we're very close. All right. There is 0. So now what we're going to do, so we're going to go counterclockwise. Till we hit the stop again. Okay, and we're on the stop, and that is 35. So half of 35 is going to be 17.5. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this, loosen it up, and we're going to move it to 17.5. 15, 16, 17.5. Okay, so now if we go back the opposite direction, we should be on 17.5 again. This is how we double check. I'm going to go all the way back around. $10, $15, $16, $17.5. That is right on the money. This cam checker is from Proform, and you can put this down into your lifter bore, and you can reverse it around. It has 2 different sides. There. So now, with the dial indicator in place, we're going to rotate the crankshaft until we get our max lobe lift. So let's see if we can do this. So at some point, we're going to hit the top of the lobe lift. And when you hit that point, see, we hit it right there. Let's pop this around. Rotate backwards. You always want to rotate your final reading in clockwise rotation to make sure that you don't encounter any slack that the chain may have. So let's look at this again. Right there. And what we're going to do is, we're almost right on it. There we go. So now with our max lift, we've zeroed out the dial indicator. All right, so now what we're going to do is going to rotate counterclockwise. I like to use, a lot of people use 50 thousandths, and you can, and there's no problem with that. I like to use 20 thousandths just because it's going to give you, I think, a better reading because you're closer to the lobe height, but 50 thousandths is fine. I'm not saying it isn't, but I just do 20. That's just me. So we're going to rotate 50 to 60 past because we're going counterclockwise. Now we're going to come back at the reading until we get to 80. That is 80 right there. And then we're going to record our number. That number is 76.5. So now we're going to go forward. We're going to go past 0. And then since we're going in the direction of travel, we can go straight to 20 thousandths. Hold it there, and then we'll check that number. And that looks like it's 135.5. All right, so we'll do some quick math here. So you have 76.5, and you have 135.5. That is going to get you 212. Divide that by 2, 106. And that is exactly where our cam comes out. Well, I for one am glad that the camshaft installed, the intake center line matched up exactly with what was on the cam card. I like that. That's good to go. Anyway, that's it for this one. Do all the things. You know what to do. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, leave a comment, do all those things. If you visit my t-shirt shop, everything that you buy goes right back into the project. So it keeps me going. So appreciate you guys. This is Hutch from Hutch High Perf saying see you next time.